My name is Stephanie Wright, and today I'll be sharing with you about a research project I did for one of my courses at Biola University. I did a grammar project and I was looking at prepositions, and I'd like to share with you today about what the results were and how those results can be applied to your classrooms. So usually when we think about prepositions, in, at, and on, they have these traditional meanings where we can explain them in fairly consistent patterns, and these patterns can be useful for creating activities and planning grammar lessons. However, these traditional meanings are not always helpful because in some cases their uses can be abstract. So I'd like to find out what some of these patterns are to help students to understand when to use them. And this is important because when students don't know how to use a preposition, they will often rely on their L1 intuition. They don't know, and so they're drawing on what they do know, but that's not always helpful because the L1 can be different from English patterns of use. So my purpose in doing my research was to answer these three questions. 1, what are the top 50 idioms formed with in, at, and on, plus a single noun, in both formal and informal contexts? And then how can they be generalized in terms of patterns, and what are the pedagogical implications? To answer these questions, I turned to the corpus of contemporary American English, which is basically a collection of language sources and samples that can be analyzed to find patterns of use. So we're looking for the top 50 most common idioms, and in our case for this assignment, we are going to think of an idiom as meaning a two-word phrase made up of a preposition and a noun, where the meaning of the phrase is greater than both of the words considered individually. Here, we have an example of a few of the corpus results for one search. As you can see, some of these results are not going to be idioms, such as, for example, at HTTP. That's not going to count, and so I had to eliminate some of these results. And going through all of the many different results, I created 4 criteria for what an idiom is, and also 4 criteria for what an idiom is not. These will be available in my paper, which I'll give you access to at the end of the presentation, but the big idea is that these idioms are abstract, independent expressions. So after sorting through tons of results, these turned out to be the top 50 most common idiomatic expressions in both formal and informal settings. When I say informal, I mean things like blogs, speaking, TV, movies, etc. And then for formal, we're looking at academic and newspaper sources. And so while these are good results, these are not going to be so helpful because we need to sort them into different categories of meaning. To do this, my professor and I, working on this project, looked at these top 50 results and divided them into different categories of meaning, such as space, time, states or areas, manner, and we called the last one stance. A little bit different from what Celsa Marcia and Larson Freeman have here, but it's based off of the famous grammar book. The full lists of these interpretive results, again, will be available online later, but here you can just see a few of the top results for the informal categories. In this case, when we say space-related or time-related, we mean pragmatically, not necessarily literally. Something is not literally inside your head in mind, but it's more of a metaphor or it's more abstract. So these are the informal ones, and here are the formal results. Just a sample again. You can see here that the idioms used here are clearly not going to be your everyday more common expressions that you saw on the last slide. Now, to answer the final question, we want to consider how these results can be used in class. So I'll go through and give you a few general suggestions. And once you have your corpus results, in this case, the results effectively become vocabulary items. So in the same way that you would teach vocabulary items, you can incorporate these idioms into your regular vocabulary that you want to cover. In total, you don't want to cover more than 5 or 12 new items in a lesson, so think about what you want to choose, and also think about which ones would work best together. At dinner and on time make sense in one context, which might be more helpful for remembering than just pairing things like at dinner and at lunch all at the same time. And then once you've decided what to say, what to teach, repeat until your students can confidently say that that word or expression is familiar. In her book, Cheryl Zimmerman gives a lot of helpful ideas for teaching vocabulary, and these are just a few that I've taken to apply to use of idioms. For one, you can use activities that involve the imagination. For idioms that are more visual, like on fire or at dinner. And then there might be other ones that don't work as well with Pictionary or charades, but that you still want to teach. So maybe have a collection of these and pick one per week to focus on. That would be a word of the week. And after that, you can also use this phrase to help you to teach others. Use blank to describe blank. For example, use on purpose to describe something that you've done intentionally. Ranking activities can also be helpful. In this case, I'm thinking of maybe an expression like at risk, where you might come up with 5 different scenarios in which someone could be at risk, and then the job of the students is then to discuss those possibilities and rank them in order of most to least severe, like getting the coronavirus versus, tripping on a rock. I don't know. And finally, for this one, you can also give exit tickets to your students. You give them a slip of paper and then they answer a question, such as how or when would you likely use this expression? And then have them return that paper to you before they can leave class. So I'll just give you a short few seconds here to reflect on our conversation so far. You can talk with the person beside you or just think on these by yourself. All right, so moving on to a few more specific ideas for idioms. You can think about them in terms of their grammar. Some of them might be more like adverbs, or some of them might be more like adjectives. And however they're used grammatically, you could create a sentence where a synonymous expression is used, and then the students have to substitute that expression with a prepositional idiom. For example, they ate dinner without talking. You can take that phrase without talking and replace it with in silence. You can also, if your school has an extensive reading program, you can create exercises that the students might do after doing a reading to help them to figure out what the patterns are or to notice different things. And then, like in the previous slide where you saw the 5 different categories of meaning, you can use those to create a Jeopardy game. And so if you set it up with space, time, state, manner, and stance, and then have different boxes, the students can choose a box and either give a definition for the idiom or use it correctly in a sentence. And finally, you can also use the corpus itself to find authentic examples. So, to do that, you can go to this website, english-corpora.org/coca, and on that page you'll see the search box. Put in the idiom that you want, and you can choose different sections like academic or spoken English. And when that comes up, click on it, and it'll give you a lot of different authentic samples of sentences, and you can pick and choose which ones work for designing lessons or materials for students to decipher inductively, or whatever you want to do with them. You can find example sentences there. So I'll give you another short period to discuss 2 more reflection questions. Okay, so this presentation has been a brief overview of my grammar research project and a few ways that you can use these results and these ideas in your class. All of these idioms and the list that I've made, as well as a full research paper that I wrote about it, can be found at this link, or you can scan the QR code to get to the same place. And I hope that will be helpful for you. If you use any of it and you like it, or you have comments or suggestions based on using it, or just want help to understand it better, you can send your comments or questions to my email address, stephanie.wright@biola.edu. And for now, I'll be happy to talk with you and answer any questions that you have.